Kia's XCeed has proved useful for this Korean maker in giving the brand yet another option to meet the needs of buyers seeking a stylish, well-equipped compact SUV. Hence the care taken in creating this updated version, which has sportier styling and slight enhancements to cabin design and media connectivity. You might feel that this bulging segment doesn't really need any further options, but Kia continues to be determined that the Ceed family should offer one, and has engineered this smart crossover contender with characteristic thoroughness.
As other brands have proved, jump on a market trend early enough and it can pay off handsomely. Here's a case in point, the Kia XCeed. First introduced back in 2019 as an SUV take on the Korean brand's more conventional Ceed family hatch. In late 2022, the XCeed got an update, creating the car we're going to look at here. A model that's turned out to be extraordinarily successful for its maker. At launch, we couldn't help wondering whether it was really needed. After all, as well as 3 other Ceed body style variants, the marque's portfolio already featured the only slightly smaller Stonic small SUV, in addition to a couple of other models that have since transitioned into new generation form, the similarly sized Niro crossover and the only slightly larger Sportage mid-sized SUV. Despite that proliferation of choice, the market's taken to the XCeed in fine style, and with 120,000 European sales prior to this facelift, this is now Kia's 3rd best-selling model, accounting for 8% of its entire UK sales. Its popularity is helped by the provision of a plug-in hybrid powertrain that you can't now get on other Ceed variants, and we're trying that one here. But you might think this updated XCeed's impact would be hindered going forward by the deletion from this revised model's launch of the 1-litre petrol and 1.6-litre diesel power plants that most original customers chose. Kia thinks not, anticipating that any shortfall will be made up for by the freshly added addition of sporty GT line trim levels at the top of the range. Across the lineup, there's a slightly sleeker look and a little extra media provision. This car's main selling point, though, continues to be the fact that for the price of a small SUV based on a Super Mini, here you get one founded on the slightly larger underpinnings of a family hatchback, which, as selling points go, is a pretty significant one. But this market segment's moved on quite a bit since this XCeed first appeared. Has Kia done enough with this mild update to move with it? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. In an era where this Korean maker brings us cars as cutting edge as the EV9 and the EV6, there's a feeling at the wheel of an XCeed being the kind of car Kia used to make. Even its more conventional, similarly sized Kia segment siblings, the Niro and the Sportage, have moved on with the 48-volt mild hybrid and full hybrid technology that the marque has decided the XCeed is too far into its life cycle to have. Which is curious given this car's importance as one of Kia's top 3 bestsellers. Equally surprising from the launch of this facelifted XCeed was the brand's decision to drop the 2 mainstream engines most customers had previously specified it with, 1-litre TGDI petrol and 1.6-litre CRDI diesel units. These continued in other markets, but at the time of this test, the brand couldn't tell us whether they would ever return here. Instead, if you're choosing one of the more affordable versions of this car, Kia wants you to have your XCeed with the single mainstream engine option remaining, a 1.5T GDI petrol power plant familiar from other Ceed body styles. If you're trading up to it from a previous 1-litre XCeed, you'll find it a fair bit punchier, with 40% more pulling power and a useful 158 brake horsepower of total output. There's 253 Nm of torque, rest to 62 miles an hour takes 8.7 seconds, and the top speed is 129. These stats are all based on the 6-speed manual gearbox version most will choose. With top-spec trim, Kia also offers this engine with its 7-speed DCT dual-clutch auto gearbox, which comes with a sport drive mode. As with the earlier version of this model, there is another XCeed engine option available, and it's the more sophisticated one we're trying here, Kia's PHEV plug-in hybrid powertrain. In theory, it's more sophisticated anyway. In practice, a current engineer might think the basic ingredients here to be a touch outdated. Even back at this variant's original introduction in 2020, this PHEV system's fundamental elements, a 1.6-litre GDI petrol engine, mated to a 6-speed version of the brand's DCT auto gearbox, had long been abandoned by more mainstream Kia engines. Back then, the electrified part of the package of 44.5 kilowatt electric motor, mated to an 8.9 kilowatt hour battery pack, looked a bit more cutting edge, but not now. Only slightly bigger PHEVs than this are now arriving on the market with batteries more than 3 times that size. All of which explains this XCeed plug-in's continuing rather below par EV range figure, which at 29.8 miles still can't quite crack the 30-mile barrier. It's difficult to understand why, as part of this facelift, Kia didn't replace this battery pack with the 11.1 kilowatt hour one used in the Niro plug-in hybrid, which would have pushed that EV range up towards a much more acceptable 40-mile style figure. Perhaps Kia didn't want to further blunt curb weight here. At a portly 2,030 kilograms, it's already 224 kilos more than the ordinary 1.5T GDI version, which is why, even though the total system power output at 139 brake horsepower isn't much lower than that of the ordinary model, the performance you get is quite a lot slower, 62 miles an hour from rest, occupying 10.3 seconds en route to just 99. You'll need to select the more urgent of the 2 provided drive settings, Sport, to replicate that. Next to the button for this, on the lower centre console, is another EV/HEV one that allows you to switch the powertrain between hybrid, electric and automatic drive modes, the effect of which you can view on various provided energy monitors. That extra drivetrain weight inevitably tells in terms of drive dynamics as well. With a conventional power plant fitted, the XCeed manages to be the most comfort-orientated member of the sprawling Ceed family of models, but this PHEV version rather clumps through tarmac tears and speed humps. If you can content yourself with the ordinary 1.5T GDI variant, the story's significantly different, and you'll get the benefits of the damping changes Kia's built in to manage the handling of this SUV body style. A higher riding body shape like this would usually need firmer springs to counter body roll, but the hydraulic bump stops fitted to the front suspension work so well here that the engineers were actually able to soften the springs by 7% at the front and by 4% at the rear compared to a conventional Ceed hatchback. The stiff K2 platform helps here, as does the properly sophisticated multi-link rear springing rather than the cruder torsion beam rear suspension setup that some competitors still use. Yes, the XCeed delivers a fraction more body roll through the bends than you'd get from the conventional hatch version of this car, but you'd have to be pressing on pretty hard to really notice it. At which point, you'll also be aided by a torque vectoring system that lightly dabs the front brakes to help tuck the nose in and ease you urgently through the corner. If Kia had also been able to deliver a slightly more feelsome steering rack, you'd be able to really enjoy driving this car, or at least the conventionally engined versions of it anyway. As it is, the feel through the helm remains slightly distant, despite changes made to the power steering motor of this crossover variant, aimed at delivering a quicker initial response to steering inputs. A typical customer of this would-be SUV won't care much about that, or about the fact that, as usual with cars in this class, there's no four-wheel drive option and off-road capability is pretty much non-existent, though the ride height of this body style is raised slightly to 184mm if, as here, your XCeed rides on larger 18-inch rims. You can also tug along a trailer if need be. This XCeed PHEV can actually tow up to 1.3 tonnes, hence Kia's confidence in offering a standard trailer pack with this variant. The brake towing weight is 1,410 kilos with the 1.5T GDI model. Of more relevance to likely buyers will be the sophisticated camera-driven features that, like other manufacturers, Kia's increasingly building into its mainstream models. You even get a degree of autonomous driving tech, courtesy of a lane-following assist system that in highway cruising conditions seamlessly controls your acceleration, braking and steering. For ordinary versions of this car though, the technology is found in more tactile things. You might even bond with one, and for a family-orientated Kia, that's an attribute worth having. Increasingly, this is now what private buyers want to see a Focus or Astra Class C-segment family hatch looking like. Yes, the ordinary models still sell in their hundreds of thousands, which is why Kia still offers one in the form of its conventional Ceed hatch. But if you had a choice, you'd probably opt for a more crossover-orientated design like this XCeed every time, which is why from the very start of XCeed production, the Korean maker found this lightly SUV-orientated contender to be the best-selling member of the Ceed family of models. Expect this revised version to continue that trend. In the original creation of this design, not much was carried over from other Ceed variants, only the doors in the creation of this sporty swept-back silhouette. In styling the XCeed, design chief Gregory Gwilliam apparently reimagined what a Ceed hatch could be from an urban crossover perspective, sculpting a relatively long bonnet and a steeply angled fastback tailgate, and extending the overhangs over the conventional hatch by 25mm at the front and by 60mm at the rear. It all still looks rather smart and, in our opinion, actually very similar to what you get from a much pricier premium badge model in this segment, like, say, an Audi Q3 Sportback. In keeping with the crossover remit, there are silver roof rails plus black plastic-clad side sills and wheel arches, but nothing too heavy-handed. Ride height increases over an ordinary Ceed as well to 172mm on base versions with 16-inch wheels, or to 184mm if, as here, your XCeed rides on larger 18-inch rims. That's a rise of up to 44mm over an ordinary Ceed 5-door hatchback or estate. If you're looking for changes that set this facelifted model apart from the original, you'll find them here at the front below the twin creased bonnet. If you happen to know the earlier version, the most obvious change lies with these new vertical silver-framed corner cutouts, which act as air curtains, guiding air around the wheels to reduce drag. The outlets in this space used to incorporate the front fog lamps, but these have now been incorporated into these restyled LED headlamps. Less obvious are the changes made to the Tiger nose front grille, finished in glossy black and dark chrome on the two GT line spec variants. The bumper, with its silvered lower skid plate, has been restyled as well, as has the revised lower air intake, which features a prominent square radar panel that drives the car's autonomous driving aids. More subtle changes feature at the rear, primarily to these LED tail lamps, which now emit a more technical light signature, which, when viewed from certain angles, appears to spear forward into the shoulders of the car. They additionally gain honeycomb-style lenses with the two GT line trim levels. And across the XCeed lineup, Kia's also lightly restyled the silver highlighted lower part of the bumper, adding in these diffuser-like strakes. Otherwise, everything's much as before. The heavily creased lines running horizontally across the stylised tailgate and rear bumper aim to give the car a more stable posture and emphasise its 26mm width increase over a standard Ceed 5-door. Triangular corner reflectors incorporate little reversing lights. There's an uber-subtle roof spoiler, and above it lies a shark fin-style roof antenna. Underneath all this tinsel, things are as conventional as they had to be given this XCeed model's originally relatively short design gestation period. So this car rides on the same K2 platform as any other Ceed, with the same wheelbase length and nearly all the same engineering. Time to take a seat up front, which is slightly easier to do than it would be in an ordinary Ceed because, as before, the seat hip point is raised by 44mm, making it easier to step in and out. And at the wheel, well, hardly anything's changed with this updated model, apart from a slight lower dashboard redesign, which sees the introduction of touch-sensitive buttons, dials and switches that control the audio volume, heating and ventilation systems. Apart from that, not much in here's really changed at all, so we'll repeat the observations we made when we first briefed you on this car back in 2019. Differences in cabin architecture over any other Ceed variant are relatively few. The raised ride height does mean you sit a fraction higher, but the feel isn't especially commanding. If you want that, you'll prefer the brand's more SUV-like Sportage model. Typical crossover buyers who want an easy transition from something more conventional may not mind this, and they should be right at home with Kia's contemporary cabin architecture, which sees this sculpted centre console angled slightly toward the driver. It feels a bit old hat to be faced with a set of analogue dials still, especially on the supposedly sophisticated plug-in hybrid model we're testing here. And it didn't have to be like that because Kia does have a 12.3-inch SuperVision cluster instrument screen developed for this car, but unfortunately continues to restrict it to the priciest GT Line S variants that hardly anyone will choose. At least the Korean maker's rather better at cabin trimming these days. In testing the original version of this car, we remarked that it was rather dark and dour inside, and this updated version's much better, with its double-stitched dash top, silver-highlighted leather-wrapped three-spoke steering wheel, grey-piped upholstery and piano-black trimmed lower centre console. Whether all this is enough to make this as interesting and engaging as a piece of urban crossover design as it's supposed to be is another question. What's not in doubt is that infotainment and media connectivity is on trend, or at least it is, providing you avoid entry-level trim. Base spec condemns you to Kia's older tech 8-inch central monitor, but otherwise your XCeed will come with the much more agreeably formatted 10.25-inch display we have here. Either screen delivering clear, neat graphics and usefully large flanking shortcut buttons. There's no separate iDrive style control for this display, such as you get in, say, a rival Mazda CX-30, but we like the clarity this Kia's touchscreen satellite navigation setup brings to the business of accessing the usual features that screens of this kind tend to deliver. There's a choice of two home screen options. One is minimalist, with merely temperature, audio settings and navigation on it, or you can swipe across to the usual home screen full of little icons. As you'd expect, this display has the normal navigation, phone, radio and media options, plus the usual Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone features. There's also a climate section, though fortunately not at the expense of physical buttons, provided further down this centre stack. The screen climate menu adding useful auto dehumidify and auto defog functions. Kia's also keen you should know that this monitor incorporates their latest Kia Connect services, these providing live information and control of the car via an app. You can access various Kia Connect options via this display too. There's a calendar, weather reports and info on vehicle diagnostics. You can even follow results from your favourite sports team. The Kia Connect screen section links through to the Kia Connect app supplied for your smartphone, via which you can set up a whole range of preferences in using your XCeed, things like navigation, radio and Bluetooth preferences, all of which the car will greet you with every time the ignition's turned on. And talking of Bluetooth, usefully the technology here allows you to connect two phones at the same time. There's plenty else on this screen too, like incorporated Kia Live services that alert you to traffic hold-ups and provide accurate information on filling station and car park locations. We're not so keen on the included cloud-based natural language voice recognition setup, which offers to tell you things like whether it's raining in London, but can't apparently manage something as basic as finding you a favourite radio station. There are, though, some really nice extra screen touches we do like here. An icon that allows you to record voice memos, for instance. So if you think of something while you're driving that you don't want to forget, You don't have to either reach for your phone or stop and write it down. And a quiet mode that switches off the rear speakers so that you can use the audio system at the same time as allowing kids in the back to drift off to sleep. We also like the valet mode that, linked to the Kia Connect app, allows you to monitor the location of the car when you're not using it. We mentioned the instruments earlier and the optional 12.3-inch Supervision cluster screen of the top GT Line S model. Now, unless you've stretched to that, you'll be faced with the setup we're trying here. A pair of deeply recessed analog dials separated by a 4.2-inch Supervision colour cluster display, basically a small trip computer screen with various sections. The road options give you an attention level monitor and a drive assist graphic. The car section has a digital speedo and various trip computers with an econometer, and the nav section has a compass and can relay navigational instructions. On startup, there's a neat system check screen too. Getting comfortable is easy thanks to plenty of seat and wheel adjustment, though lumbar support is missing from the driver's seat of volume variants. And you only get this centre console storage box and its associated sliding armrest if you avoid entry-level trim. Frontward visibility is expansive thanks to these thin A-pillars. Not so good though is rearward visibility thanks to the small rear screen and thick pillars behind the rear doors that block your view throughout tight parking manoeuvres. Kia is apparently aware of this, which is why a rear view camera is included across the range and rear parking sensors come as standard above entry-level trim. Aside from media connectivity and infotainment, most of the main boxes have been properly ticked, the horizontally orientated fascia giving the cabin quite an airy, spacious feel. It's split into two sections, a lower area housing controls for audio, heating and ventilation, and an upper region dominated by that centre touchscreen, another from the school of interior styling that thinks modern buyers want the impression of an iPad sprouting from the middle of the dash. Getting comfortable is easy thanks to plenty of seat and wheel adjustment, though lumbar support is missing from the driver's seat of entry-level variants. Cabin practicality is reasonable, though door pockets could be bigger. On the plus side, Kia has helpfully provided a lidded area where you can charge your phone away from prying eyes. This compartment ahead of the gear stick, which contains 12-volt, USB-A and USB-C pockets. The brand has also remembered to include an overhead compartment for your sunglasses, and below the gear lever a pair of cup holders is covered by this ratcheting sliding top. To the right of that, this mid-range model provides an electronic handbrake switch with a small coin tray just behind it. Base variants dispense with that arrangement in favour of the usual conventional lever. There's also a shelf at the bottom of the centre stack that, on plusher models, incorporates a wireless charging mat. You get ticket clips on the sun visors, plus there's a big glove box and a large storage cubby between the seats that's spacious and deep, but lacks any interior connectivity points. Overall, there's really not too much to criticise here because, by and large, the detail stuff's been really well thought through. So, build quality from the Slovakian factory is tight, latches operate with a quality click, handles slide back with a damped sigh, and you get thoughtful touches like discreet lighting around the USB and aux-in ports. But of course it isn't perfect. There are more buttons than we're used to seeing in a cabin of this kind these days, and cheaper plastic panels have been used in areas like the base of the centre console. Right, let's take a seat in the rear. Now, dimensionally, this XCeed model sits almost precisely between an ordinary Ceed hatch and the brand's mid-sized Sportage SUV, being 85mm longer and 48mm taller than the Ceed, but 120mm shorter and 155mm lower than the Sportage. What will that translate to in terms of rear seat space? Well, let's have a look. Essentially, it feels much like a Ceed hatch. Space for your legs and head is usefully greater than you'd get in the kind of super mini-based small SUV that this Kia's primarily priced against. Knee room is aided by these scalloped seat backs, and the notably low centre transmission tunnel means that if need be, it'd be much easier to fit 3 adults across this bench than it would be in most rivals. Unfortunately though, there's nothing particularly clever provided back here. Some cars in this class offer sliding seat bases, others give you reclining seat backs, and there's none of that in this Kia. Practical touches include small door bins with even smaller incorporated bottle holders, plus seat back pockets, twin central vents and overhead coat hooks. There are no overhead reading lights, but twin cup holders feature in this fold-down centre armrest. Isofix child seat fastenings feature as usual on the 2 outer seating positions, and a USB-C connectivity port is also provided back here, one of the reasons why up to 3 children should be perfectly happy. We'll finish as usual with a look at the boot, which on the conventionally engined model is 426 litres in size. That's 31 litres larger than an ordinary Ceed hatch, but 165 litres smaller than the Sportage and almost 200 litres smaller than a cheaper Ceed Sportswagon estate. That might matter to you, but probably it won't. If you've chosen the PHEV version we're trying here, luggage space takes quite a dive by 135 litres to just 291, which is not far off the sort of capacity you might get from a Super Mini. With either powertrain, this area is accessed by a rather high loading lip, but it's deep and regularly shaped. Helpful touches include a couple of bag hooks, this left-hand retaining strap, and 4 chromed tie-down points. Plus, on the left-hand side, you get this 12-volt socket as well. There's space beneath the boot floor too, but a lot less of it in this PHEV model, which has only a shallow tray just about big enough for the charging lead. The plug-in hybrid system battery also means that you have to lose the ordinary version's space-saver spare wheel. Across the XCeed range, if you need space for longer items, you'll be disappointed to find that there's no ski hatch, and that the useful 40-20-40 split for the rear bench that you get in some other cars in this segment is here rather meanly limited to the priciest GT Line S XCeed variant that few buyers will want to stretch to. For bigger items, you'll need to flatten the 60-40 backrest, which frees up 1,378 litres of total fresh air in the conventional model, or 1,243 litres with this PHEV. At the time of the launch of this revised XCeed and of our test in spring 2023, pricing was pitched about £4,000 higher than it was when we first tried this car, just after its original autumn 2019 launch. As we filmed, that meant pricing in the £24,000 to £34,000 bracket, with the top figure getting you the plug-in hybrid variant we're trying here. With this PHEV, you can only have a single mid-range 3 designated level of trim, and as you might expect, you have to have an auto gearbox, in this case a 6-speed DCT setup. With an equivalent level of spec, the conventionally engined 1.5T GDI petrol XCeed model you're more likely to want will save you over £7,000 over this PHEV version and gives you much more choice with its lineup, 2 and 3 trimmed models as before, and new for this updated lineup, sportier looking GT Line and GT Line S variants at the top of the range. Choose the top GT Line S and you'll be offered the £1,100 option of replacing the standard 6-speed manual transmission with a 7-speed DCT auto box. Choosing this XCeed over an ordinary Kia Ceed hatch requires a premium of around £1,200, which seems a reasonable increment. Competitor comparisons are slightly problematic here, but in a good way. Your first reaction when considering this car might be to pitch it as a small SUV, like one based on a Super Mini. But Kia already has one of those, the Stonic, which has smaller engines and starts from around £20,000 in price. The XCeed, as we've already suggested, is, as its name would indicate, based on a family hatch, the Ceed, so is a fractionally larger thing. But the price span we gave you at the beginning really isn't that much different to what you'd need for typical mainstream brand Super Mini based SUVs. You'll be familiar with many of these if you're shopping in this segment. Ford's Puma, Renault's Captur, Nissan's Juke, Vauxhall's Mokka, Fiat's 500X, Seat's Arona, Volkswagen's T-Cross, Mazda's CX-30 and this Korean model's close cousin, the Hyundai Kona. You could save a little in this segment with a Citroën C3 Aircross, a Skoda Kamiq or a Suzuka Vitara, and save quite a lot with budget brand models in this class like SsangYong's Tivoli, Dacia's Duster and the MG ZS. But you'd need to pay a bit more than Kia is asking here to get a Peugeot 2008, a Volkswagen T-Roc or a Honda HR-V, with more still needed should you want a posher badge on a small crossover of this kind, as would feature on segment entrants like Audi's Q2 and the DS3. So, there are all your class alternatives. Lots of them, aren't there? If, having considered these rivals, you conclude that it is still an XCeed that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Kia's been with standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. All XCeeds come with alloy wheels, silver roof rails, front fog lights, tinted glass automatic headlamps with high beam assist, LED rear lamps, a body-coloured rear spoiler and an alarm, plus neat touches like a front wiper de-icer. And there's also cruise control with a speed limiter and some significant electronic camera-driven safety features that some more budget-minded rivals will charge you more for. And we'll talk about those in more detail in a few minutes. XCeeds also come with a space-saver spare wheel, unless you go for this PHEV version, which unfortunately has to trade that in lieu of a tyre mobility kit. Inside, with all XCeeds, as you'd expect, there's air conditioning, driver's seat height adjustment and leather trim for the steering wheel, gear knob and handbrake. You also get a 4.2-inch Supervision colour cluster display in the instrument cluster, plus a reversing camera, Bluetooth, a 7-speaker DAB audio system and Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring. And of course there's an app, as ever. This one's called Kia Connect, and it allows user smartphones to remotely access vehicle information such as trip data and statistics, vehicle location and vehicle lock status. Users can also check and change their vehicle settings directly from their smartphone, including navigation, radio and Bluetooth preferences. As part of the app, customers can additionally access a last mile navigation feature, which once the car's parked, will help them to navigate to their final destination on foot via either Google Maps or augmented reality guidance on their smartphone. You can use the same system to help you find your parked car once you're ready to return to it. And there's a valet mode on the app that enables customers to monitor their vehicle remotely when it's being driven by someone else, which will offer added peace of mind if you've allowed your teenage children to borrow the key to your XCeed. OK, so that's covered off what you get with base 2 spec trim. What about if you can afford to spend a little more on your XCeed? Well, if so, you'll find that the next trim level in the hierarchy, this test car's mid-range 3 spec, gains quite a lot. This plusher spec swaps out the base model's 16-inch alloys for these larger 18-inch rims. And the base model's older tech 8-inch colour touchscreen audio display gets swapped out for the brand's much more sophisticated 10.25-inch touchscreen satellite navigation setup with Kia Connect phone app connectivity. At 3 spec level, you also gain rear privacy glass, rain-sensing front wipers, power folding mirrors, a dual horn, rear parking sensors, smart cruise control and a drive mode select driving mode system. And inside there's a smarter cabin, courtesy of faux leather for the seat bolsters and door trim, along with various interior garnishes in satin chrome and black high gloss. Plus there's dual automatic air conditioning, a wide view driver's door mirror, an auto-dimming rear view mirror, an electronic parking brake, rear vents, height adjustment for the front seat, an auto defog system and a 12-volt socket in the boot. Plus you get a centre console with a storage box and sliding armrest and powered front seat lumbar support and height adjustment for the front seat as well. This is where the XCeed lineup used to end, but as part of the changes made to this revised model, Kia's added 2 further more dynamic-looking spec levels, neither of which can be had with the PHEV variant that we're trying here, though. Likely to prove most popular is GT line trim, which adds more sporty trimming touches inside and out, like glossy black and dark chrome trimming for the radiator grille, dark chrome window surrounds, black side sill mouldings, high glossy black roof rails, honeycomb-style tail lights and a black shark fin antenna. Plus, there's a different design for the 18-inch wheels. Inside, you get aluminium pedals. Plus, there's heat for the front seats and for the steering wheel, which is D-shaped with grey stitching. If your budget can stretch right to the very top of the range, there's GT Line S trim, which gets you a panoramic glass roof, a powered tailgate, a 12.3-inch TFT Supervision cluster instrument display, powered operation and memory controls for the driver's seat and upholstery in a combination of leather and suede. Plus, a wireless phone charger, a more flexible 40-20-40 split for the rear backrest and an upgraded 8-speaker JBL premium sound system. On to options. Now, as usual with Kia, there aren't that many, the brand believing that customers will prefer to move up a trim level rather than go box ticking. Your dealer will, though, sell you practical items like a detachable tow bar, a boot mat and the aluminium roof crossbars that will allow you to add a ski carrier, bike carrier or a roof box. You can also add a finisher to the rear bumper in chrome optic or stainless steel. Chrome optic finishings available for the door mirrors as well. Bear in mind too that you'll almost certainly have to pay extra for your chosen paint colour. The only standard one is solid splash lemon. Even white costs extra. We've got premium spirit green here. Let's finish with a perusal of the safety stuff on offer, which remains an area where this Kia continues to easily meet the class standard. When this XCeed was first introduced, it was quite rare in the segment to find a full set of camera safety features fitted right across the range, but this design has always had them. Kia's made a few little tweaks to the roster for this facelifted model. The main change is that the driver attention warning system has been updated to include leading vehicle departure alert tech, which provides a visual alert on the screen to inform the driver that the vehicle in front is driving away, such as at traffic lights or in slow-moving traffic. Otherwise, it's pretty much as you were. As you'd expect these days, autonomous braking, Kia calls its system Forward Collision Avoidance Assist, is standard and includes pedestrian and cyclist detection. There's also high beam assist to automatically dip your headlights for you at night, and a lane keeping assist system which alerts you if you're drifting over lane delineating lines. For automatic models, there's also a lane keeping assist system with lane following assist, which uses a camera to keep the car centred in the lane and works between 0 and 81 miles an hour. On this PHEV variant, you also get smart cruise control that'll not only automatically keep you a safe distance behind another vehicle on the highway, but can even slow you right down to a stop and start you off again if you come across a tailback. With top GT Line S trim, you also get blind spot collision warning and intelligent speed limit warning as well. Across the XCeed range, all the usual passive safety features make the team sheet as well, of course. There are twin front, side and curtain airbags, although there's no driver's knee bag, plus ISOFIX rear child seat fastenings and active front head restraints that prevent whiplash. As usual with a Kia, there's the brand's VSM or Vehicle Stability Management System, which ensures stability when braking and cornering by controlling the car's ESC or Electronic Stability Control System if it detects a loss of traction. In addition, as usual with a compact SUV of this kind, there's tyre pressure monitoring and hill start assist control to stop the car rolling backwards as you pull away on inclines. As you'd also expect, the ABS anti-lock brakes are aided in panic stops by a brake assist feature, plus an emergency stop signal that flashes the hazard lights to warn following motorists. It wasn't long ago that choosing a crossover over an ordinary family hatchback carried quite a penalty in terms of running cost efficiency. What's helped to drive sales in this segment in recent times is the fact that this is no longer true. There'll always be a slight fuel and CO2 downside with any SUV-orientated model, of course. Greater weight and boxier aerodynamics see to that. But as long as it's marginal, customers in this class won't mind too much. And that's certainly the case here. Kia has kept the weight increase of this XCeed model over a normal Ceed hatch to just 20 kilograms, which is why the running cost downside here over that ordinary model is limited to no more than around 5%. Let's get to the figures. As we told you in our driving section, from the launch of this facelifted XCeed model, Kia was no longer offering the earlier models 1-litre T GDI petrol and 1.6-litre CRDI diesel engines. At the time of filming, it was uncertain whether these power plants would ever return to the range. You'd think the replacement 1.5 T GDI petrol unit, the single mainstream engine remaining, would feature some kind of electrification. After all, the brand has both 48-volt mild hybrid and full hybrid tech available to it, as evidenced by the engine lineup of the only slightly larger Sportage SUV. But no, the 1.5T GDI unit is resolutely conventional. Just as well then that its combined cycle fuel economy figure, 46.3 mpg, isn't much different to that of the previous 1-litre petrol unit. A selectable fuel economy meter in the instrument cluster helps you keep somewhere close to that in regular driving, and there's a brand's usual ISG system to cut the engine when it isn't needed in town driving. Kia quotes a CO2 reading of between 137 and 143 grams per kilometre, depending on the trim level you choose. And those stats are for the manual 1.5T GDI model. The automatic gearbox you can have, with top GT Line S trim, shouldn't be any sort of efficiency drain. Its CO2 readings quoted at 142 grams per kilometre. To give you some perspective on that, these figures are much the same as you get from the other compact SUV in this class, based on a family hatchback platform, the Volkswagen T-Roc, which manages up to 47.1 mpg and 135 grams per kilometre in comparable 1.5 TSI form. Interestingly, they're also much the same as those you get from a Kia Sportage in 1.6 T GDI form, complete with 48-volt mild hybrid tech. So clearly, this XCeed isn't missing out too much from its lack of mainstream engine electrification. We say mainstream engine electrification, as you'll already know if you've been watching other sections of this film. The other main XCeed powertrain option definitely does have its share of battery tech. The PHEV plug-in hybrid version we're trying here. As we told you in our driving section, this model combines a 1.6-litre GDI petrol engine and a 6-speed DCT auto gearbox with a 44.5 kilowatt electric motor. To be frank, the upfront price premium demanded by this variant, it costs over £7,000 more than a comparably equipped 1.5T GDI model, looks quite hard to justify. But you might manage that if you were to regularly make full use of the 29.8 mile WLTP rated electric driving range, 36.6 miles in the city, made possible by this variant's 8.9 kilowatt-hour battery pack, located alongside the 37-litre fuel tank beneath the rear bench. Of course, for a plug-in hybrid XCeed to make any sort of sense, you'd have to establish a regular battery replenishment regime for it. Recharging to 100% takes 2 hours and 15 minutes using a 240-volt 3.3 kilowatt AC charger. With the PHEV XCeed, owners can use the centre dash touchscreen or the provided Kia Connect app to preset charging times and to locate nearby public charging points. As for the fantasy figures delivered by the PHEV variant, well, it's rated at 201.7 mpg on the combined cycle and 32 grams per kilometre of CO2. Sounds good, but those aren't actually particularly good stats for a PHEV, because the EV range figure of this one can't crack 30 miles and the CO2 reading's over 30 grams per kilometre of CO2. The BIK tax rating is 14%, rather than set at the 8 or 12 that quite a few rival PHEV models offer. There are plenty of driving tools to help an XCeed PHEV driver maximise returns. There's a selectable Eco Drive mode alongside the lower centre console's EV HEV button, and a power meter gauge on the left-hand side of the instrument cluster that has blue charge, green eco and grey power zones. You can activate an energy flow monitor to show on the instrument cluster screen, or have it show in larger form on the car's centre monitor, where it's part of a selectable PHEV section that also includes details on EV range, energy information and eco-driving, as well as the charge management features we mentioned earlier. What else might you need to know? Well, plug-in hybrid versions of this XCeed do get a £10 discount on the regular £155 annual road tax fee, so your bill will be £145 every 12 months. And likely residual values across the range? Well, they're a lot higher than they used to be on mainstream Kia models. Independent experts reckon that after 3 years and 36,000 miles, an XCeed 1.5 TGDI or PHEV model with mid-range 3-spec trim would still be worth around 44% of its original value, which is pretty class competitive. Stretch to a 1.5T GDI model with top GT Line S trim, and that residual figure would fall to 39%. When it comes to servicing any XCeed, regular garage visits are needed every 12 months or 10,000 miles. And as usual with a Kia, you can budget ahead with prepaid servicing plans, courtesy of the brand's Care 3 package that offers a fixed price deal covering your first 3 garage visits. A package that can be extended to include 5 visits if you go for the upgraded Care 3 Plus option. In addition, a customer can purchase services up to and including the 7th one, so matching the full length of the warranty. Whatever plan you go for, you can also bundle an MOT test in with it, and on that basis, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that virtually all maintenance costs will probably have been covered for the entire time that your name will be on the logbook. An even stronger buying incentive is a much trumpeted 7-year, 100,000 mile warranty, which, like the Care 3 servicing packages, is transferable to future owners. However, it is worth pointing out that the warranty only offers unlimited mileage for the first 3 years you own the car. Thereafter, you'll have a 100,000 mileage restriction. If in future the car is sold through a Kia used approved dealership, when less than 18 months old or with less than 18,000 miles on the clock, the warranty will be topped up to match that of a new model. You might also want to note that roadside assistance cover is limited to 1 year, but you do get a long 12-year bodywork warranty. As for insurance, well, there's an 18E grouping for base level 2-spec trim, it's 17E for the other 1.5T GDI models, and 15E for this PHEV version. Life is certainly a great deal more interesting for someone wanting to buy a compact crossover these days. Say what you like about the current SUV craze, but it's certainly delivered up much more of a want one factor when it comes to the purchase of a C-segment model like this. And the XCeed delivers this with the kind of smart styling you'd normally expect to have to stretch to a premium brand to get, especially in this updated form. Of course, there are crossover buyers who'll want more powerful engines or a classier cabin than this car can offer, but we'd suggest quite a number will be very satisfied with this Kia's impressive quality, well-judged practicality and sensible pricing, which isn't really much different to that required by smaller Super Mini-based SUVs in this class. The Volkswagen T-Roc is really the only other conventionally engined crossover that competes in this segment with a family hatch-based chassis, and one of those costs a lot more. Not everything's ideal, of course. It's nothing like as sporty to drive as it is to look at, especially in this PHEV form, and we'd like to have seen this update standardise Kia's digital instrument cluster, given the prices now being charged. On the plus side though, thanks to that Ceed platform, there's more rear seat and boot room than you'd expect from a car in this class, which, as selling points go, is a pretty strong one. In short, we can see why the XCeed's carved out such a strong niche for itself in the Korean maker's lineup. Likely customers will love the looks, they'll appreciate how it's so easy to switch into this car from something more ordinary, and they'll value the long 7-year warranty. So to sum up, if you're shopping for this kind of car, there are plenty of reasons why you might want this one.